Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be looking at the Luminasta Chainsaw Man from the series Chainsaw Man. This is a SEGA prize figure. If you don't know what a prize figure is, basically a prize figure is a completely machine manufactured product. So that means that the entire manufacturing process is done by machine, which includes paint, and these are done pretty much by the thousand. So they are mass produced, completely machine painted, and basically it means that they are fairly cheaply made, and there are many of them out in the wild, and therefore they aren't that expensive. Whereas the higher end figures are much more limited, and a lot of the final details and sculpt work and things like that are done by hand or at least supervised. So basically that's what a prize figure is, and the Luminasta line is a new line that SEGA has introduced. Basically, they are about the same price as a standard prize figure, although I can see them charging more very soon. But basically, it's similar to a standard prize figure price, but the quality and detail is of a higher caliber. Think something along the lines of the mission statement that Pop-Up Parade had, which is meant to be halfway between prize figure and scale. Now, Pop-Up Parade is inconsistent to say the least, but that was roughly the mission statement that they had. That's what Pop-Up Parade is meant to be, and a bunch of other companies are sort of doing their own thing now. So that's where Taito's Tenetol line comes in, that's where Katie Cole's Light series comes in, I think Furu's doing something as well, and Sega's doing Luminasta. And Luminasta is an interesting line. So far, not nearly as expensive as the other ones, so it's still hitting those same notes as standard prize figures, and you can win them as standard prize figures in Crane games still. But generally, so far, all the figures are a little bit larger, a little more detailed, there's a lot more going on. And today we're going to be looking at the Luminasta Chainsaw Man. So taking a quick look at the box, you can see this cool promo art, or promo image of Chainsaw Man sort of leaping at you. It looks cool. There's the Luminasta brand in the top left-hand corner, as well as the SEGA brand in the top right, and the logo/name of the character, which is Chainsaw Man. And this is Denji in his chainsaw form. If you haven't watched Chainsaw Man, highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, I also highly recommend reading it. It is just fantastic. There's something special about it. But anyway, on the side of the box, you can see a full image of the figure just leaping out. It looks quite cool. On the back are basic instructions on how to assemble it. You can see it comes in quite a few parts. And on the other end, there's just sort of like a zoomed in side shot. It looks okay. And on the top, there's another promo image. So yeah, looks pretty cool, and the box is a decent size, but let's quickly crack it open and have a better look. Now, quickly assembled, here is Chainsaw Man in all his glory, and not only is he quite large, he is about the same height as the box that he comes in, but is much wider and a lot more dynamic. It almost seems like he shouldn't fit in that space-wise, but Japan found a way. But yeah, this is an incredibly dynamic figure. It's not often that we get prize figures this dynamic, or this sort of like edging the line between figure and diorama, and I say that just because of the way that he's leaping off like a bit of rubble, even though the rubble is like so-so and turns into like a black puck type base. It's still cool to have, and if you sort of ignore the base, this figure is just super dynamic, super cool, and not what you normally expect from a standard prize figure, especially one at this price point. So detail and paint wise, it is quite good. The sculpt is absolutely fantastic. I love all the sort of gritty detail of the chainsaw. While there is no blood on it, there is some like etched in detail and sort of like carved in like scratches and stuff like that, that make the chainsaw seem way more interesting than say the noodle stopper that I looked at not too long ago. There is a difference in color on the back of the chainsaw head, like his neck is a different color to the back of the sort of like engine. There's like a gunmetal grey for that sort of engine bit, and the other bit is almost like a little bit coppery. It looks really cool. Mine unfortunately does have a paint error on his lower jaw, but it's fine. The teeth all sort of clump together into one mess, but there is enough to find detail in there to be fine. His tongue looks pretty weird from one side, but front on it looks fantastic. His eyes look a little bit cartoony, but from the right angle and the right lighting, he looks incredible. And there's not much you can really do with that. That's just his design. the detail and etchwork in his outfit is quite good. There's a lot of folds, a lot of dynamic range. Something simple like his shoelaces flying in the wind looks great. The sort of big shoes that he's got that are barely tied up look fantastic. He's got a very simple belt, it's fine. His tie waving in the wind looks good. All the folds in his shirt are great. It is also shaded, which is good. You can really tell the detail in there. His hands are very well detailed. It's a very weird thing to design Chainsaw Man just because there's a chainsaw splitting his hands apart. So it can really break the sculpt if it's not done right. And here it is done perfectly. It looks so good. The chainsaws, technically they look really dumb, but if you execute it well, it looks fantastic. And here it does look really, really cool. I like that both hands are doing something unique. Looks like he's about to really like leap down and jump on someone. The chainsaw in his head looks good as well. Just generally really, really good. I like that it's all consistent across the board. Like his chainsaw in his head is smaller than the ones on his arms, as it should be. And yeah, there's nothing too crazy about it. There's a bit of shading and stuff on the base. The base piece looks like it's meant to be rubble, but all of it looks like the same material, like in terms of it should be concrete, metal, stuff like that. It all looks like it's the same material, but it's fine. Nothing too crazy. What I don't really like is the separation into the black of the base. It's not a smooth transition at all. I would rather just elongate sort of this effect that we had, or just have the stand that's holding his leg up just hovering like some of the figurism figures do. Like basically just not have the black base. But the black base does support the figure quite a bit, so I understand why it's there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only real issues that I have is I've got just a bit of a paint error on his chin, and there is one thing that I would say is missing from this figure, and it's missing from a lot of Chainsaw Man figures, unfortunately. Usually it's missing from the prize figures, which is fine. But it is also missing from the Figma Chainsaw Man, which is stupid. And it's the absence of blood. And if you have watched the show or read the manga, you know that the blood plays a pretty major role in Chainsaw Man's whole thing. Not only to power him up, but also to indicate that these chainsaws aren't just doing damage to the enemies, but doing damage to him. They're actually cutting him. It's not that they just sprout off his arms and he's fine. It's almost like a Wolverine type thing where the claws hurt him as he pulls them out, which makes sense. So yeah, there's a distinct absence of blood, and I intend to fix that by, just flicking some paint on it with a paintbrush and some acrylic Tamiya, and we'll quickly see what that looks like. So, coming back to this figure after a little bit, I've flicked quite a bit of Tamiya acrylic paint on this. I've separated the arms and the chainsaw on the head, and just really dunked a brush in paint and just went wild flinging it about, and that was so I could get a sort of realistic splatter effect. And some areas turned out better than others, but I think overall it adds the character that this figure was missing. It just needed that little extra oomph to make it complete, and I think that this really did it. And if you are going to try this at home, I would recommend using a paint that is easily removable, like an acrylic, because if you make a mistake, you can just rub it off with a little bit of water. But if you did like an enamel or something like that, you might accidentally hurt the actual paint that's already on there, or the plastic that's already there. So just be warned if you are going to try that, especially if you try lacquer paints. So I would recommend trying acrylic, especially because it is watery and very similar to the consistency of blood. So once it dries and when it sprays on the actual figure, it actually seems pretty legit, which is cool. But yeah, I flicked a lot of the paint on the chainsaws, and it also got on the arms, which is good because I think that also adds a bit to it as well, because it would look a bit sort of like weirdly sterile as well if you didn't have it spray on the arms, because it wouldn't make that much sense. But yeah, I think it just really brings it all together, especially on the head. I think it just gives that little extra color and texture and liveliness to the figure. But yeah, I think that with just a slight touch up, you can make an already fantastic prize figure bordering on near perfect. If you wanted to, you could probably change the top coat on the figure itself to make his pants look a little more realistic, as well as a few other things, customize the base a bit. But generally they are all fairly easy fixes, and just the blood fix is enough to really highlight this figure. But overall, I think this is incredible. It's like the paint apps that are already there are pretty damn consistent. There aren't any real issues. I've seen a few others of these in person, and generally very consistent across the board. They all just look good, and I'm happy about that. I'm happy to have a more consistent figure than what Pop-Up Parade's doing. I constantly bash them, and they sort of make it easy. I did also put paint on my Noodle Stopper Chainsaw Man. It didn't turn out as good, but I do think it also added a little extra liveliness to the figure as well. But yeah, generally, if you can get this figure for cheap, as it should be, I think it'll actually rival a lot of the sort of scale figures we'll be getting. Like, I do think the Kotobukiya Chainsaw Man figure looks okay, but that's just it. It's just okay. The Shibuya Scramble one looks immaculate. The Figure Arts 01 looks good. The SH Figure Arts looks pretty good. The Figma looks just sad, which is a shame. The Nendroid was cool though, so I don't know what's going on with Good Smile Company these days. But yeah, as a figure on its own and a good representation of Chainsaw Man, if you had to get just one figure out of the ones that are out now, I would highly, highly recommend the Luminasta Chainsaw Man, and if it's a sign of things to come, Luminasta is going to be something to watch. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.